Shalom. I offered to rant about this travesty, um, and somebody asked me to actually go ahead and rant about it, and so here I am ranting. Hello, Chazi. So to explain what exactly I am ranting about, if you watched the confirmation hearings of Brett Kavanaugh, you saw the testimony of Christine Blasey Ford. And leaving all the political stuff aside, what really, really, really bothered me was how much damage she was allowed to do to public knowledge and mental health through what she said. Now, this is an article from the Associated Press, which was repeated in all over the place, but not enough places, I have to say, which was a result of what used to be the left or the liberal desire to fix hey Sandy to fix this very public misunderstanding that people have about memory, which is actually very harmful. And in the name of this political confirmation hearing, which honestly, it would be nice if Supreme Court Justice confirmation hearings were not as political as they have become, especially since the Bork era. Won't even start with all of that. But outside of that, so this article talks about how she got most her science of memory mostly right, which means it was completely wrong. When asked Thursday how she could be sure it was Kavanaugh who put a hand over her mouth to keep her quiet, psychologist Christine Blasey Ford. And this is the travesty, that she was not just a psychologist. She was a professor, and as far as I know, continues to be a professor of clinical practice of psychology at Stanford University. Cited levels of chemical messengers called norepinephrine and epinephrine in her brain at the time of the alleged attack. She said those chemicals helped encode memories in a brain region called the hippocampus, so that the main memory was locked there while other details kind of drift. Later, she said a memory of Kavanaugh and another teen laughing during the assault was indelible in the hippocampus. So let me explain why this is so horrible and incredible, and the fact that this portrayal of how human memory works used to be what the left, as in critical race theorists and criminal defense advocates and all the people you would expect to be the Soros types used to try to correct is that is not how our memory works at all. Even the idea that it's possible that some human beings have that sort of photographic or eidetic memory is itself controversial. The fact that the vast majority of us do not have any sort of memory in that manner, that's not how human memory works, is completely uncontroversial, and that's what the AP story makes clear. That is not how human memory works. So imagine, for example, you hear a sound, right? It's not that in an analog manner your brain records that sound. It's that more in the manner of a digital recording, right? Where what you said, right? So, for example, if you heard me say Shalom ubracha, right? You could write those in English letters, right? Shalom ubracha, however you decide to write those sounds in those letters, and then remember from that encoding. Now, if you don't recognize a sound, you're going to have difficulty encoding it and putting it in your memory. And your memory is certainly not indelible. In fact, every time you remember something, every single time you bring it up in your memory, you change it slightly because you're re-encoding it based on your understanding at the time. And this is why some memories are traumatic. Because you have difficulty actually placing them well in your frame and in your mind, yet because of the danger of them, because of the importance of them, because of the shock to your system, you then keep on trying to bring them up, but they're disfigured and they're incomprehensible to you and they're emotionally packed, and so you can't deal with them well. That's why one of the best ways we have of avoiding post-traumatic stress disorder is that as soon as you have an experience like that, you talk it over with someone several times, and you bring up and you tell the story over and over again, and you digest it. And if you do have PTSD, like I did from my childhood, right? Because those memories were all manner of uncomfortable and indecipherable to me. What good therapy for trauma does is allow you a safe space in which to bring those memories up and digest them and figure them out and make them understandable to you until they're no longer traumatic. That's how psychotherapy for post-traumatic stress works. And Professor Christine Blasey Ford, who is a professor of clinical practice of psychology, right? She teaches people how to be therapists, should know this theoretical framework of how you treat traumatic stress. Now, the reason why the political left in the United States has been trying to make this clear is because when we look at overturned convictions where people spent years in jail, almost invariably, and you can look in the forensic scientists are adamant that basically we should stop using witness testimony in courts. The reason we use eyewitness testimony in courts is in the Bible, it talks about witnesses, and we are used to using that type of court system. And in order for jurors to understand what's going on, they need a witness. And that's how our system is set up. You call a witness, you call expert witnesses, and you have them explain the facts. And you also have testimony from eyewitnesses. And frankly, there has been a large push by forensic scientists to eliminate eyewitness testimonies from criminal trials completely, because it is far less reliable than any of the scientific testimony we would allow. So this is all manner of wrong, of wrong. And when a therapist helps you recover a memory, right? That recovered memory is oftentimes, if not always, because you bring it up so many times and you're trying to understand it, like imagining that that's actually a valid memory of exactly what happened is completely wrong. And a good therapist helps you understand that. But we had the pedophilia psychological craze with recovered memories back in the 80s, where many people went to jail, not a few. It wasn't one or two. I think there were dozens, if not hundreds of people who ended up prosecuted and jailed for all manner of crimes that they did not commit, because, especially when dealing with children, psychologists would be helping them deal with the traumas that they had. And children, their memories are even more flexible than adult memories, which are very flexible. The memory of an adult is incredibly flexible. The idea that you actually remember things in any way, like a video recorder or something like that, for at least the vast majority of adults and human beings, but quite likely every human being, with the possible exceptions of people who are neurodivergent, right? People who are actually wired completely differently than most human beings. That's not how your memory works. And imagining that that is how your memory works is actually quite detrimental, both for your mental health and for your relationship with people. So one of the first things that a good psychotherapist will do when dealing with a traumatic memory is help you understand that no, it's not indelible in your hippocampus. It is the absolute opposite of that. It is, in fact, a memory you have not. It's like there's something not working in your memory that is causing it to be traumatic, and because of that malfunction in your capacity to integrate the memory into the rest of your thoughts, that's what's causing the PTSD. And by bringing the memory back and trying to digest it and integrate it into things you understand, that's how you make it less traumatic. And unfortunately, once you have done that, what is left of it is basically, I mean, it's as unrecognizable to the original thing. Like, imagine somebody gets stabbed, right? And they allow it to heal, and it doesn't heal well, and a surgeon cuts it open and stitches it back together. Now imagine that they have to do that hundreds of times. That is the process through which your memory is being healed, right? Many times of going over the same memory, stitching it back together, right? And then imagine somebody looks at what's left once all that treatment is done, and looks at the scar that's left and says, this matches this knife, so this knife must have been used to do this stab wound. No. Actually, if it matches anything, it's going to match the scalpel of the surgeon. I hope that whole allusion is clear. So, the two things that anybody who actually cares about the science of memory and how it affects people in the real world needs to keep in mind is especially the victims of crimes, but eyewitnesses of criminal behavior, right? They are the least likely to remember what happened well. Least likely. In fact, it is almost impossible that somebody who has been traumatized by some event is going to have an accurate memory of it. Like, that's the opposite of how memory works. And so we should definitely not rely on witness testimony in criminal proceedings. And Professor Christine Blasey Ford should have known that as a psychologist and as a professor of clinical practice of psychology at Stanford University. And second, we need to help people understand that their memory is in fact that flexible in those ways, so that they can process traumatic memories and not be so in therapy and in criminal law, the science of memory and a proper understanding of science of memory will help have fewer wrongful convictions, and will help people who are victims of traumatic events heal faster. And what Christine Blasey Ford did with her absolutely unforgivable testimony, that I can only hope was a lie. I can only hope that she did not actually believe the things she was saying, is make it that much harder for millions of people, if they were to have traumatic memories, to understand how that process. And I remember at the time talking to somebody who had PTSD and heard her testimony, and it was in fact damaging to that one person for sure. This wrong testimony certainly made it harder for this one person that I spoke to in fact recover from her trauma, and made it that much harder for us to overturn wrong convictions and to have a fair justice system that does not rely on faulty human memory. And all of this was aided and abetted by academics. And because if it was the other way around, and if a Republican, if it was a Democratic justice going through confirmation hearings, and it was a conservative professor of psychology and a psychotherapist had made such obviously anti-scientific and wrong statements, of course all of academia would have been in an uproar. All forensic scientists would have been up in an uproar. Criminal defense attorneys would have been up in an uproar. Psychotherapists and the American Psychological Association would have been up in an uproar, as they well should have. Yet the precise opposite happened, with the Associated Press running cover for her supposedly getting the science of memory mostly right. And I cannot emphasize how horrible and damaging this is. I don't care about Brett Kavanaugh, really. I really don't. I care about all the people who were hurt by this person who hopefully was lying. Because let's consider, what if she wasn't lying? What if she genuinely, as a trained psychologist, she has a PhD in psychology and is a clinical psychotherapist in the state of California. So she is completely incompetent. Her education is completely worthless, because what is most important for a therapist to understand, which is how human memory works and how we help someone get over a trauma, she completely failed to learn that in her PhD program. She completely failed in her clinical training after her PhD program to become a clinical therapist. And she would then be teaching her ignorance to her students as a professor at Stanford University. This is supposed to be one of the top universities in the world. So what does it say about our entire society if she wasn't lying? I don't know how I could be more clear about how wrong this is, and how important it is to recognize how wrong this is. Okay, rant is promised rant is over. If anybody, few people are watching, if anybody has questions or anything like that, I'll hang around for another 5 minutes, and then I will probably go to bed. But I have been ranting about this since the confirmation hearings, and I mentioned it the other day, and I said if anybody wants to hear the rant, I would. And somebody actually commented that they were interested in hearing the rant, so here it is. Good evening, and thank you. I'm glad somebody enjoyed my rant. Indeed, Sandy, indeed. Honestly, it's most distressing that there wasn't an immediate reaction from the professionals. And the fact that the Associated Press gave that headline, I mean, the article itself tried to clean this up, but and I linked the article in the description. You can go read it for yourself. She completely had the facts wrong. There is no defending what she said from any standpoint, scientific standpoint. And the harm that video clip, which millions of people saw, will do, especially to women who may have been, who may have either been a victim of a crime or simply been traumatized, it's completely unforgivable. It is completely unforgivable. Yet, yeah, it is what it is. Okay, I think I am going to go ahead and end the broadcast. A good night, people.